Hi, everyone, and I'm Dr. Tammy Nelson. I'm the author and editor of Integrative Sex and Couples Therapy. It's a therapist's guide to new and innovative approaches. And I'm so excited to have today one of my co-authors, Wendy Miller. Welcome, Wendy.
Hi, Tammy.
Dr. Miller is a clinical psychologist. She has over 35 years of experience, and she is in New York City. She's a certified sex therapist. And she's worked in the field for a long time. She's on the faculty of the Women's Therapy Center Institute. She teaches classes on human sexuality, and she consults at the Center for Optimal Living in New York City on sexuality and substance abuse. And recently, she became a therapy and research collaborator with Dr. Peggy Kleinplatz's Optimal Sexual Experiences Research Team at the University of Ottawa, and she's conducting couples therapy groups based on this model. She's also been a faculty lecturer at the Integrative Sex Therapy Institute in Washington, D.C. And she has written a great chapter. I actually really love that she wrote this chapter. We're going to talk about that on treating no-sex couples, integrating emotionally focused therapy with sexuality counseling. It's chapter 3. It's in the front of the book because it's a really important chapter. She takes a type of couples therapy, EFT, emotionally focused therapy, which was developed by Sue Johnson. And she integrates the ideas of sex therapy with this particular form of relationship therapy, which I don't think anyone's really done yet, in a way that is accessible and insightful, and she really gives it a lot of thought, but also makes it usable and user-friendly for both relationship therapists and sex therapists, which is ideally what we're looking at when we talk about integrative therapy. So welcome, Dr. Wendy Miller. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Tammy. Pleasure.
I love Wendy because not only is she a colleague and brilliant, but she's also my friend. So I'm so happy to have you. So is there anything else that you want to tell people about yourself before I ask you why you wrote this particular chapter?
No, well, maybe just that I've been more and more doing groups with people around sexuality. I have a men's sexual health group, and then the groups designed Peggy Kleinplatz's work for couples. And I am really being blown away by the power of groups when people can sit with other people and share these really intimate things. And suddenly things they were so ashamed of become normalized and even laughed about. It's really powerful. So that's my latest, compelling new cutting edge for me.
Awesome. Oh, I can't wait to hear more about that too. Maybe that's in book 2. I'm compiling a list of what we need to include in the second book. So tell us, why did you write this particular chapter about EFT and sex therapy?
I wrote this chapter because I'm well versed in EFT. I've been studying it for over a decade, and it's my main, not my only model, but my main model when I do couples work. But I also get a lot of couples who are struggling with their sexuality. And in particular, I seem in my practice to get a lot of couples, maybe because I've been in the field for a while, who haven't had sex for 10, 20, even not unusual 30 years.
Wow, that's really a sexless marriage.
It's really a sexless marriage. And these are, in general, both gay and straight couples, people who feel pretty good about their marriage. There's not a lot of conflict. There's, day-to-day struggles, but people who are pretty happy, they've built a life together, they've raised a family, they have a substantial investment, but they're tortured by not having sex. Maybe they put it on.
They're good companions, but there's no erotic connection.
Good companions, but the erotic connection seems so far away. Well, they just can't imagine how to enter that space together. Some of them initially had a very alive sex life in the beginning, some never did. That doesn't seem to matter. It's become so foreign to them. And often these couples are getting older, sometimes in their 60s. And one couple came to me and said, "You're our last, our last hope. Like, let's see if we can make something happen here." And even if those couples don't start having a really rich sex life, often they can be helped to feel better about it, right? Because often it's the meaning that we attach to things that is what tortures us. And so sometimes people can actually find a way to stay in a sexless marriage and feel okay about it. But my goal is always to try to help them refine their erotic energy and their erotic life together.
I love what you said about, what tortures us is the meaning that we assign to something. And
Right.
so even if you can't help them create a really sexual life after such a long period of just being companions, you can help them with the story or the narrative that they make up about it.
Right, right. And sometimes changing that can actually free things up. For a lot of the couples I see, it's actually the woman who feels really tortured by not, and deeply, deeply distressed by the absence of sex with her partner. And if what that means to her is, I'm not desirable, you're not really interested in me, you don't really want me, it can feel horrific. But if it means, you're on a ton of medication and your libido is down and you are wild about me and you still, are excited to spend time with me, changing that narrative can actually sometimes open up a space where two people can then find each other in an erotic way. At the very least, they'll be less tortured.
Right. At the very least, it'll be less about me. Yeah.
And my failings.
And my failings and not being wanted.
Right.
Yeah, which is definitely healing in itself.
Yeah.
Oh, and what is the connection with EFT? A lot of people don't know what emotionally focused therapy is, or maybe, haven't done the trainings, or can you tell us what's the connection there is for you?
Sure. The other reason I wrote this chapter was because I was interested in seeing how to integrate EFT as a model, which is very focused on a couple's attachment with working on sexuality. And so EFT is a model of working with couples that is very here and now focused. You focus on what is happening in the room in front of you. You're less interested in communication skills and less interested in the content of fights, and very interested in the emotional, the way two people communicate on a deep emotional level, and the ways in which they don't, and the things that get in the way, and how to create a space where two people can share at a more vulnerable, deeper level. Rather than accusing, complaining, withdrawing, getting into a negative loop where they can get very stuck and feel pretty hopeless. Mm. So you're really trying to help two people learn how to reach for each other and be there, how to both look to their partner and the partner be responsive. Lots of times people reach for a partner in a way that pushes that person away. And then they get angrier, and then the person goes further away, and then you're just stuck in this escalating loop, and it doesn't do anyone any good. But I in particular wanted to see how focusing so intensely on attachment could be integrated with facilitating erotic interest, right? Because in EFT, attachment, a strong attachment, is the base for sexuality. That's what, in the EFT model, that's what makes you feel safe enough to explore, to play, to bring yourself to show up naked. And in sexuality, that's not always the case. Sometimes even attachment for some people can really get in the way, as you and I have talked about, right? Sometimes Absolutely. People feel freer and more expansive with someone they barely know and they're not planning to see again. There's less at stake. So I wanted to see how to bring those together.
Yeah, I like that. And it's part of the reason that I invited you to do a chapter in this book. And I was really anxious to have you, because it is something that I think, in my books, I've talked about, if you feel too safe, then it actually decreases the eroticism. You need a little bit of distance. You need to trust your partner. And I know that's a matter of semantics, but I think trust is different than safety. Safety can many times feel familial. It can feel parentifying, and it can decrease that feeling of eroticism. You can feel like good companions, like you're describing some of your clients. But it can take away that erotic charge. And so I really love that you were willing to take this head on and figure out, what is the attachment issue here around couples that are having no sex, good sex, or that are trying to become sexual again.
Right. So I think what I discovered as I was getting into it is that, like so many things, it's not a binary. It's not yes attachment, no attachment.
It's not black and white. Yeah.
Right. That they're integrated in a really nuanced, complicated way. So you do need some security and attachment, but not so much as you say that the erotic charge, you're just a mush on the couch in front of the TV every night. You could be very attached, but nothing very exciting is happening there. And you really need some risk. You need to feel like you're a little bit entering unknown terrain. You need to remind yourself that you don't actually know everything about your partner. And maybe you tell yourself that to feel more secure. But that this person is, there's a lot more to discover.
Yeah, so you need some curiosity.
Decades.
You need some curiosity still. You need to not put your partner in that box and say, "Oh, I know everything that they're into."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So can you tell us how you discovered writing this chapter? Like how do you do that? Like, how do you find that balance? What's the answer, Dr. Wendy?
Well, I think it's really different for different people. Do you know who it was that said we all have fingerprints, but they're all different? Who said that? Was it John Money? I don't know. Someone said that. Well, that's kind of how it is with sexuality, right? The actual flavor of it is pretty different for people. So some people really see sexuality as an emotional connection, and so the attachment is super important. For other people, it might be a complete adventure where they leave their regular self behind and they just let themselves travel into all sorts of fantasies and role plays and want to really have heightened sensual experiences. It's really different, and there's no right way and no wrong way, and it can change over time, and you could be one way and your partner could be another way. There's lots of pieces and they can all get mixed up in different ways. So how to help people? One is make room for enormous variety, be accepting of everything unless someone's being hurt by it or it's non-consensual, like everything goes, right? Mm-hmm. I think another thing that came out of writing this was maybe we shouldn't focus on desire quite so much. Maybe we should focus on fun.
I like that.
Desire is such a load. Everybody wants to feel desire, and it causes so much trouble for people. It's become this enormous, what would you call it, Tammy?
A problem.
Problem. It's like this out of reach thing that everybody thinks is the answer, like the Holy Grail or something. If only I had desire. Well, I don't know. What if you forget about desire and you think about fun? We can all do fun. Maybe the question becomes, was that fun? Was that enough fun that I might be willing to do that again? Yeah. So when I work with people, I do try to take the focus off of, I try to expand the idea of what sexuality is. It can be many, many things. I try to focus on fun and pleasure as opposed to desire. We've been so inculcated with the media and this way that we should, this driven way that we should have sex. I think Stella Resnick in one of her books said, if you watched movies, you would think the best sex happened on the kitchen table.
Or on the beach.
Right, or on the beach. Actually, those are not so much fun.
No, it's a terrible idea to have sex on the beach. It's so painful.
Right. And the kitchen table's actually not so comfortable either, right?
Oh, that's very awkward.
So we have these ideas of what it should look like. And I really want to help people free themselves from a particular vision of right sex and help them find their own sex.
Oh, that's beautifully said.
Find their own fun, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, I love this idea of sort of the pleasure-oriented sex instead of getting to the finish line or getting to, getting to this
So much
preconceived
pressure.
idea. So much.
Oh my God, sex does not do well with pressure. People put so much pressure on themselves.
Yeah.
And so much comparison, right? Right. And all that takes you out of the moment, which is kind of what you need to be in your body and tuned in and kind of open and available for whatever.
So I was going to ask you what advice you have for therapists or clinicians, but I think that's really good advice. Like, tell people to stop having sex on the kitchen table. And don't focus so much on getting to, this idealized vision of sex. But is there something, first of all, I think that's great. But second of all, is there something like a specific intervention or a way that you would help clinicians with working with couples or groups or individuals about how to use this method that you have?
Well, one thing I want to say to clinicians, this is slightly off, but I was thinking about this earlier, is don't join with your clients in this cultural myth that people kind of age out of sex or passion, right? That's really important. I work with a lot of couples who are post raising families, and they all come in with this idea, maybe it's over, maybe that's just behind me. And it may be that your body doesn't work quite the same way, but there's this amazing research that Peggy Kleinplatz did where she interviewed many, many long-term couples of all sorts and stripes and predilections. And they almost all said that she was looking for couples who were having really, really amazing sex, really like optimal, stellar experiences. And they all said they couldn't have done this when younger. They all said they needed a kind of maturity and capacity to be with themselves. And the idea of how did their penis or their vagina work, that was not totally irrelevant, but fairly irrelevant. It was low on the list of what was important. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The experience was what was important, kind of showing up and risking and being available and vulnerable and making contact.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really, you can do that till the end.
So you're dead, pretty much.
So you're dead.
Yeah. So being really like mindfully present.
That's our COVID brain right there, right? Till you're dead.
Right. We got to start thinking about that. Like really, take advantage of the time that you have with someone without worrying so much if it's the right kind of sex or,
Right.
Now that you're post-menopausal, does that mean you go over a cliff and it's over, or do you keep, going back in there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's great advice. So get out of that myth of sex and aging that somehow they don't go together. Yeah. Like the highest rate of STDs is people in their 80s now.
That's wild, isn't it? That's really wild. I love that.
I love that too. So that's great advice for clinicians. And what about people who are maybe not clinicians or partners of clinicians that are listening? The same advice goes to them too, but
yes. Yeah. Don't give up. There's always capacity for growth. Stop comparing yourself. Maybe I was thinking also about this idea of chemistry, stop looking, what is chemistry? That's a really interesting word. Mm. Chemistry might just be when two people are uninhibited. That is what happens when two people are open and uninhibited, right?
Good point.
What is chemistry? Stop having this vision of sex that involves chemistry and spontaneity and where you're carried away, and see what you can develop. I don't know. See if you can get yourself to grow your physical intimacy a little bit. Stop looking at the end goal. Maybe that's what I'm saying. You know, can you touch your partner and really feel their skin and the warmth and the texture, and that this is a hand that wants to be touched by you? Can you kind of really soak in that experience and then build on it a little bit and keep building?
That's lovely. Yeah, so really create that experience and appreciate it, and don't think that it's supposed to come spontaneously and by itself and because of quote unquote chemistry. Like, you create that.
Yes, yes, yes. And you never get too old to create that.
And you never get too old to create that. Well, Dr. Wendy Miller, that is just great advice. And it is such a pleasure to have you and to talk to you. I could talk to you all day.
I love talking to you, Tammy. I could do it also all day.
And until we get old, we will keep talking.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
And even when we're old, we'll keep talking. Because old is like this concept that keeps getting further and further out.
Even though we get closer and closer.
Yeah, it keeps changing. The meaning keeps changing.
Right, right, right.
So for those of you who want more of Dr. Wendy Miller, can you tell people how they can find you and find out more about you?
My email. I'm embarrassed to say it's AOL. W. Miller, PhD at AOL.com.
Do you have a website?
No, I don't have a website. I need to get a website. But you can find me through, I do have a blurb at the Center for Optimal Living. So you can also find me that way.
Okay, very good. So the Center for Optimal Living, or at AOL. Or you can just Google Wendy Miller, PhD in New York City, and you'll find her. Yep. You can also find her in my new book, Integrative Sex and Couples Therapy, where she has a brilliant chapter on EFT and sex therapy. So thank you again, Wendy, for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Tammy.
And for those of you who want more information on integrative sex and couples therapy, you can find the book at Amazon or anywhere books are sold, including Pesci Publishing and Media, or my website, drtammynelson.com. If you're interested in becoming an integrative sex and couples therapist, which is a certified CSCT, you can go to istitraining.com. That's Integrative Sex Therapy Institute training.com, ISTI training.com, to find out more about online and someday in-person classes again. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, be well. Take care. Bye-bye.